Hey, what's up guys? Talon back in the video. We are playing Gray Zone Warfare. I'm just doing a quick test of performance at 1080p, lowest settings basically, to induce a CPU bottleneck. So I'm using frame generation, DLSS, ultra performance, and then the only epic preset is the texture resolution, because if we look at it, we're at like 270 frames per second, something like that. So if we go down, yeah, you can see it doesn't really make a difference, but it's going to make kind of a difference to the way textures look. So we're going to leave it like that. And again, we're just playing potato mode just to test for CPU bottleneck and to see the performance, essentially when we induce like the limiting factor of the CPU. And actually in this case, you can see we're about 95% CPU utilization running around here in base camp with the helicopter coming in. Looks absolutely potato mode, but we're actually still in a GPU limited situation. If you look at our frames, they're up around like 370 just looking down. So you can see that, and it's still 94% GPU utilization. So we're actually still, even in that situation, GPU limited. The CPU not being the limiting factor can still actually render and provide for more FPS. It's actually the GPU here. The other thing is that while I'm recording this with Shadowplay, I'm using a custom preset, which is a higher than normal preset that you use. It's inducing about a 10 to 15 frame per second loss just by recording this using Shadowplay, as opposed to when I'm just playing the game and I'm not recording. So I am actually losing frames per second just doing that. We're just running around outside base camp here and do a little area, just testing the performance. I'm running this with a 14900 KS, running at its 253 watt power limit and with a slight undervolt. And then I'm using an RTX 4090 at default settings. And then I'm running DDR5 7200 CL34 dual rank. So I'm running 2x32 gigabyte sticks at 7200. Now you can run just 6000 CL30 XMP on those sticks, which that's how they come out of box, and you'll get very similar performance. Like it seems like that it doesn't really scale that well with memory speed. I mean, it does a little bit, but it's very, very little. Basically, you could just plug in, hit XMP, and hit go, and you're gonna get high FPS. I mean, we'd be over 300 frames per second here. And the dual rank seems to help with this game causing stuttering. It just seems to smooth the game out a little bit. As you go to new areas, it does stutter here and there, and that's just due to like it's caching the shaders for areas you've never been, I'm assuming. And I did an Nvidia wipe recently. I've got about 20-something hours in this game. I did a driver reinstall and did DDU, cleaned out my drivers last night, and I deleted the shader cache from the system. And as I'm going to new areas, I'm noticing that it will stutter here and there, just as it's like it's loading that area. It's never been to that area, and it can induce a pretty nasty stutter. The other thing is that if you're getting rubber banding, it's not actually your system. The servers actually rubber band here and there. Like you'll be running and your character will run back and forth, and that's just literally the system is just experiencing network rubber banding, network latency, and of course that presents sort of as a stutter. So I've never been in this area, and oddly enough, it didn't cause any sort of stutter running over here. But yeah, as if you run into new areas you haven't been, you can induce a stutter and cause it, but it's just temporary. It's something. If you've never been in that area, you might get a stutter here and there. I'm not guaranteeing that it'll happen, but it can happen. So That's it, guys. That's pretty much if whatever you're seeing now, about 260 at 10 to 15 frames per second, and that's what I'm getting if I'm not recording in this very limited situation. The funny thing is that my RTX 14900K with a 4070 Super at these same settings can perform pretty similarly. So I don't know. It seems like it does seem like. I mean, it can get close, but not quite. But it does still seem like we are still very much GPU limited. Because if I look at the ground here, you can see we go up to like 380. So it definitely seems like, yeah, the system could render out more frames. A 4090 at this resolution is not going to benefit as much. So as you go down resolution, GPUs are going to get much closer in performance. So even like my 4070, like I was saying, can get very, very close because you're not really pushing that GPU to its full benefit, right? The benefit of the high-end GPU is really going to be at those higher resolutions where the gap is going to grow. Now, somebody wouldn't probably play it this way. You could play it this way and then maybe use DLAA, where the game is now going to look significantly better. And, I mean, we gave up frames, but, like, look at how much better the game looks, like if you wanted to play it this way. I still probably wouldn't play it like this. I would probably play, because I'm using a 4K 240Hz OLED. It also has dual mode, so it does 1080p 480Hz. So it is a real use case where some people may want to play this way, but I feel like in a game like this where you really want to be able to see the characters, because the textures and the grasses and everything can kind of muddy up. I kind of feel like most people would probably not choose to play this way unless they have to, unless they're really turning things down to get the max performance out of the game, or maybe they just don't care playing at the lower settings. They want to remove foliage as much as possible, because I'm assuming it does. I haven't tested that, but I'm assuming it removes foliage and shadows. So maybe, I mean, I'm hoping that would be very game breaking if it completely removes them, because no one's going to turn any settings on at that point. I'll have to test that. I'm sure there's some optimizer video out there or something that talks about that. But they would probably choose to play with this. I really like DLAA in this game. And I'm glad that they put in FSR3, AMD's frame generation, Nvidia DLSS 3.5 or whatever we're up to, and Nvidia's frame gen, and Intel XeSS. I think Intel's working on a frame gen as well, but it's not out yet. It's awesome to see an indie developer, a smaller studio, put all of these things into the game day one so that everybody can use what's best for their hardware, or they can pick and choose. It's really cool to see that. I love when games give consumers options. So anyways, guys, that's basically how it performs. It's you can go into town. It performs very similarly in the first village that you fly to. It's about the same. The base camp is actually very demanding just running around in that area. So yeah, that's about it. I probably wouldn't choose to play at these settings, but I kind of wanted to kind of show you guys, like, worst case scenario, what it can perform like, and you can see the power consumption at this is like 150 watts, which is pretty high. It's not it's not overheating. We're only running 50 degrees, in the 40s, but you know, it's going to use, as you push up your frames, obviously your usage is going to go up. If I were to switch this right now to 4K, you guys will see, let's go to 1440p, you guys will see the power usage is going to go down just like the frames. So give it a second. 1440p. And the power usage kind of stayed the same. Alright, we'll go to 4K, and I promise it should go down. But the FPS didn't change that much, so the power usage is going to kind of stay about the same. It definitely looks better, though, right? I mean, we're still getting pretty high FPS. Let's go to 4K. Let's see. Hopefully it goes down. It should go down a little bit, right? Because you're obviously going to get lower frames. Okay, so now we're down. Yeah, so now we're down around 100 watts. You can see that, you know, as you go up in FPS, right? Obviously, your power usage goes up because it's demanding more of the CPU to feed that GPU with those frames. So now this looks incredibly good, even on low settings. I feel like this still looks very good. We're using DLAA, and then as you go up in resolution as well, micro stutters and things like that you may experience are not really going to be felt, because you're going from a lower FPS to a slightly lower FPS, so you won't really feel that. You'll also have adaptive sync there to help smooth and buffer those transitions out. But if you're running, you know, almost 300 frames per second, you go to a new area and it dips down to 150, you're going to obviously feel that. It's going to feel like a very big stutter, because it is a very big stutter. So that's a big change in FPS. That's a huge swing where, you know, if you're at this, you may not experience the stutter. So, you know, if you're playing at high resolution, you may not experience stutter, but if you're playing at the lower resolutions, you know, and you're trying to get high FPS and you transition to new areas that you haven't cached yet, yeah, of course you can experience stutter. Hopefully they can smooth that out and fix that with future updates and optimizations, but with this being early access, basically a beta, yeah, just expect the performance isn't going to be the greatest as they work on things and as they implement and change new things. What is going on with this ground? You guys see that? It's like freaking out. My GPU is probably dying. That's probably what it is. Let's go back now. Back to 1080p. Watch the power usage. So 1080p, and we'll use ultra performance again. Give it a second to pop back up here. Okay, there it is. And now power usage there it goes. It's going to spike way up. So now we're back up around 280 frames per second, 290. We'd be over 300 if we weren't recording. But overall, I mean, it's still pretty smooth. I'm not experiencing stuttering. The frame time is pretty flat. So, yeah, that's basically, yeah, that's pretty high power usage. But, you know, I'm pushing upwards of 300 frames per second. You can kind of expect that when you're running 5.9 gigahertz on all your P cores. I mean, that's a pretty high clock speed. So, anyways, guys, I hope this video is useful to some of you who wanted to see how this performs, what kind of FPS you can expect with this particular setup. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.